What is going on, Royale fans? It's your host, Galadon. You are watching Clash of Clans Attacks, and yes, I am showing you my best deck ever. Now, before we get too far into this episode, I have to preface it by saying, of course, because of the way Clash Royale is balanced, you are never going to find one deck that will always win for you, but this deck, well, it put together more wins in a row than I've ever had in Clash Royale. So as the video goes on, we will pop up the deck on the right-hand side so you can take a look at it, and right away you'll notice it is really centered around the Goblin Barrel and the Mirror cards. That is definitely a dangerous combination when you can drop two Goblin Barrels back to back and your opponent often doesn't have an answer for the second, and occasionally there are other times where other cards are perfect being mirrored back to back. So we'll just get into this first battle against Pierre of Darkness Kings, a couple of level 10 players, and I did manage to knock on the door of his left lane tower, but a wizard and some minions were home and they are pushing back. But here we go. The first Goblin Barrel was poorly timed, but we've got the mirrored Goblin Barrel down, and it does get a lot of damage down to that left crown tower. Now, my opponent had no counter to that Goblin Barrel, so I'm hoping he doesn't have arrows in his deck, which is a great sign for later in this battle. Unfortunately, though, he does have a giant P.E.K.K.A, and she's moving towards me, crossing the bridge any moment, so I'm trying to slow her down. I've got the Tombstone, which works out very well, and then he drops an Expo. Dirty Expo users. Don't like him, don't care for him at all. I dropped the freeze spell, luckily freezes the P.E.K.K.A in her place and the Expo as well. There is a freeze on the counter, and that's not going to work out well for me, except for the Tombstone is just barely out of range. So the P.E.K.K.A makes no progress whatsoever, finally goes down in a blaze of glory, and I get the dragon there. I drop another Goblin Barrel because the first one wasn't answered, and sure enough, that second Goblin Barrel goes to work. Mirrored Goblin Barrels, here we go. When you don't have an answer, I'm going to keep throwing them, and sure enough, that third Goblin Barrel just about takes that tower down. Meanwhile, the Expo just did a little bit of damage on my left tower. So obviously the Goblin Barrel, even without the mirror, is a big problem for players that aren't ready to counter it. This guy's got a wizard back there now, and a P.E.K.K.A dropping down, so we've got to watch out for that dangerous combination, as the wizard will take out units that are trying to get the P.E.K.K.A down, and then that stinking Expo, so I freeze it. Goblin Barrel this time, rather than on the tower, on the Expo, works out beautifully, gets that Expo right out of the way, and my units are going back to work on the P.E.K.K.A while I throw some arrows down there. That gets the tower to just about down. A big confrontation right on the bridge, but I come out ahead, and that dragon is closing in on what's left of his left lane tower. Can't quite get there though. Another wizard in the back is going to protect it, but there's really no way to stop me now, even with the P.E.K.K.A going back down on the bridge. As time counts down, this Goblin Barrel is going to ice the victory, and there it goes. Time runs out, and I win 1 crown to 0. So I'm really loving this deck. I'd won about half a dozen battles in a row. It's got the splash damage you need. It's got the power to take out small units and the swarm power to take out big units when you have to. And a freeze, just in case, can be used on defense. A great defensive card. Now right away, in this next battle against Lewis, you will notice that he does have the bomber and lightning and of course the arrows, which are all potential counters to the Goblin Barrel. The lightning, of course, very expensive and definitely the last resort if you're trying to get a Goblin Barrel Goblin set down from around your tower, but the bomber ideal, as are the arrows. So a pretty standard start to this attack, and he puts down an Inferno early, but that's really not that great of a factor against a Goblin Barrel, especially mirrored Goblin Barrels or a frozen Goblin Barrel, because I can pick up the tower and the Inferno at the same time if I do decide to drop the Goblin Barrel in combination with a freeze spell. But he's got the dirty Expo once again. I try to answer with my mirrored dragon, but it is going to get melted by those minions, and I've frozen it temporarily. The arrows miss, not a good sign. And again, my right tower is suffering severe damage. That Expo is going to get a lot of damage in before it finally goes down. The Goblin Barrel, though, goes on the tower, and he thought it was going for the Expo, so the Goblins get some good damage in. It would really not have made sense to send the barrel in on the Expo. It was too far gone anyway. It really would not have been a fair trade in elixir for damage. So we got about 500 off of that right tower, but we are way behind with less than 1,000 hit points left on my right lane tower. He is pushing forward with barbarians. I've got the tombstone to try to distract them and slow them down. He drops the lightning spell, and that's going to take my tower down to almost nothing. Just over 100 hit points left. I counter with my own barbs. We got a little barb on barb action by the water. He's got another Inferno down, just offset to the left. I try to drop a dragon and sneak it in here, and it actually does work out pretty well. The bomber can't damage it. Both the Inferno Tower and the Crown Tower frozen. The dragon is going to get in there and get that tower down all the way and put me ahead a surprising 1 crown to 0. Now, I don't expect that right tower to survive, so I immediately go to work in the left lane, as does he. He drops the Expo, but I've got mirrored Goblin Barrel, and he already used his arrows on the first Goblin Barrel. That means the second Goblin Barrel, well, doesn't quite get the job done, but almost gives me a chance to drop the Barbarians, the Dragon, and then the Freeze spell, and that will finally allow that Dragon and 1 Barbarian to get in as he lightnings my right tower down. There goes another Goblin Barrel, and he obviously didn't have arrows ready because we just saw him use them. Goblins get some good damage in. He drops the Bomber again. Another good answer to the Goblin Barrel. I go full, drop another Tombstone. He drops another Expo. So sick and tired of the Expos. I'm trying to stop it with the Barbarians, Dragon, and the Skeletons. Big confrontation right on the bridge. At least the Expo was not locked onto my tower. Everybody once again gets in. The Goblin Barrel again on the tower. Arrows, but I've gone ahead with a lot of damage, and here is where the mirror card goes into full effect, dropping the Goblin Barrel once again, gets it under 100 hit points, and yes, in overtime, arrows are enough to give me the win, 2 crowns to 1. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I would expect Clash Royale to be a game of trends and balancing. Trends coming from different players trying out different decks, what seems to be working the most frequently, and balancing from Supercell. As we've already seen, they will increase the stats of cards that are being rarely used and sometimes decrease the stats of the most frequently used cards. So no one deck is ever going to be the be-all, end-all deck, but this one is my favorite and my best ever right now. So let me know what your favorite cards and decks are down in the comments. Let me know if you're excited to play the game when it comes out globally, which is going to be very soon. In the meantime, subscribe for the earliest update and release information. And of course, I hope to see all of you back here again tomorrow for more Full Attacks.
Galadon, I'll balance you. Come on, let's go. Head to head, you and me. Stop putting it off, Galadon.